The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said, "Amen, amen, I say to you, whoever does not enter a sheepfold through the gate, but climbs over elsewhere, is a thief and a robber. But whoever enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens it for him, and the sheep hear his voice, and as the shepherd calls his own sheep by name and leads them out, when he has driven out all his own, he walks ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they recognize his voice. But they will not follow a stranger. They will run away from him because they do not recognize the voice of strangers." And although Jesus uses this figure of speech, the Pharisees did not realize that what he was trying to tell them. So Jesus said again, "Amen, amen, I say to you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. A thief comes only to steal, slaughter, and destroy. I came so that they might have life and have it more abundantly." The Gospel of the Lord. They know my voice, and they know that my voice is so that they may have life and have it more abundantly. Battle lines are being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. It's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. For what it's worth, Buffalo Springfield. I believe the year that song came out was the year I was born, so you know it's an old song. In some ways, that song has become sort of my regular opening for my social ethics class that I teach pretty regularly. Because I do think that our own tradition of Catholic social teaching and our own task that we all have to discern what's right, especially in the world and among our lives, that our ethical discernment requires that we do stop and pay attention to what is going down, and also pay attention to what other influences and voices and lines of reasoning and influences might be out there. And I'm not sure that our world is getting any easier along these lines. There's a whole lot of influences going into especially our young people that I'm not sure they really even acknowledge as an influence. Therefore, they're not even paying attention to how it might influence them with all of the social media and then, of course, depending so much on answers from AI type of sources, which are just algorithms that source what's out there as by way of text and language and information, and just put it back and try to give you an answer they think you want. Not an answer that's right, not an answer that's necessarily a good answer, but just the answer the algorithm thinks you want to get. And so there's a real problem with the voices that we pay attention to the lines of reasoning that might be thrown at us. There's a real need for us to stop and pay attention to what is going down if we're going to live a full life, a healthy life, and above all, a moral life. And so, friends, I think today's gospel in this Easter season that we're celebrating really challenges you and me to pay attention to what is going down. There's a way in which we look for our own investment of time and energy and the many ways we can pray so that we can tune into who God is for us. And if we don't do that, we might not be grounded well enough to then discern where God's voice may be calling us to respond to what's going on down around us, what is happening in the world. I think we see that happening more and more, unfortunately, in our world, in our Catholic community. There are a number of voices presenting as Catholic that are really a perversion of the very message of Jesus of Nazareth, an outright perversion. But it sounds good because maybe it sounds like patriotism, or it sounds like self-interest, or it sounds like this is, of course, right. This sounds like it's packaged in a certain way, but it's a complete twisting and perversion. I think we were able to see that in the news coverage of Pope Leo's trip to Africa last week, where he had prepared these speeches weeks in advance to address certain issues in the countries he was visiting. And people all of a sudden started connecting dots between the truth that he was speaking, an authentic representation of our Catholic faith, our Catholic values, our Catholic teaching. And people started comparing it, right, to other narratives out there. And they, oh, Pope Leo's in a fight with this one or that one. No, actually, no. The speeches were all written a couple weeks before he did his trip. He was speaking to general issues that we should be concerned about. But that's because, unfortunately, we have strands of twisted Christianity. Like I said, and I'm going to put it that bluntly. We have, for example, Christianity presented as a nationalism. This is not unusual. I can name countries in the past: Franco's Spain, Hitler's Germany. You can go down the list. Duvalier's Haiti. You can go down the list historically of political leaders who have twisted the Christian message to support their politics. And their politics are often a politics of oppression. They want to control the Christians. And it was very successful in certain places, right? In Nazi Germany, they created, all of the Protestant churches got together and created the Reich Church, the official Reich Church. We're going to get sanction and support from the government, so of course we'll do whatever they want. And then they, therefore, as Christians, signed off on the innocent killing of millions. The Catholic Church in Germany at the time created the Concordat, an agreement between the Vatican and that government that said, well, don't mess with us and we won't mess with you. So there's, you might say, sins of omission there. Although we know that both of those churches had members who spoke up, especially clergy in each, but also individual lay people, Catholic and Protestant, who spoke up. Some of them lost their lives in that destruction of life. So we know when Jesus says that there are those who come before me sometimes whose voice is like that of the thief who comes only to steal and slaughter and destroy, that's real. We've seen that historically, and we can't be fools about that. If there's anything, Christianity calls us to a raw honesty that isn't foolish. It might at times seem, because of our values, to be extremely open and to be able to engage in dialogue and encounter, sure, but not to the point where all of a sudden we're compromising our core values. A core value where we talk about a gospel of life, a way that life should always be preserved, a way when we always talk about how when you leave people in peace, they can thrive. I mean, in a just peace, not just any kind of peace, but a just peace. We know that if we create equity where people have opportunities to support themselves, to thrive in certain ways, then we have something that looks more like the reign of God's love that Jesus constantly preached, that we needed to be a part of, to take the graces that God gives us to help create here on earth as it is in heaven. So children, friends, we need to pay attention, like the old song says, to stop and pay attention to what is going down. The old song that Buffalo Spring's sang says, "Paranoia, it strikes deep. Into your life, it will creep." More often than not, when we get an anxiety about the world around us, and there's plenty to create that anxiety, we might opt into a fear-based thinking and grab on to the simplistic sense of Christianity that somebody may be giving us. And right now, a lot of Catholics are buying a Christian nationalism that's a false Christianity and that clashes directly with our Catholic values. The very teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. So friends, I think we really need to pay attention to that. What else? There's other ways in which the Christian message can be twisted to meet other agendas too. But I think right now, I'm really concerned about the way in which some people are going down a road that leads them further away from the church. I was heartened this year, and we saw it here on our own campus at St. Joseph's University, of an uptick in people wanting to be a part of the church and completing their sacraments of initiation. We didn't even advertise, and we had a big group come, a bigger group than normal. I was so heartened by that. But I'm also alarmed and concerned that some of our Catholic community are going to walk down a road where they walk away from the church because they no longer really hold to the core beliefs that Jesus of Nazareth taught. And those beliefs don't always look like anybody's politics. In fact, I would argue today that if you look seriously at the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth and then say, how should I act in the world? How should we be as a community? What kinds of policies ought we to establish? It's not going to look like anybody's political agenda right now. It's going to look like values that need to be realized. And for better or worse, we live in a society where we've got to work those through a system of democracy, a government where policies and laws get enacted. And so bit by bit, policy by policy, law by law, we do what we need to do to support what we think will get us closer, not always perfectly, but closer to what is my value. In the meantime, though, I shouldn't look for simplistic answers. I should do a real discernment, holding Jesus close to my heart. I love the way in which we talk about that way, that Jesus' voice is something that we should be familiar with. The message of Jesus of Nazareth should be something that we can recognize, and that we shouldn't just, in some ways, look to the way in which we are called to simplistic Christian values, but know that this is an ongoing discernment to really discover those values in our midst. And that we then will, of course, come to know more deeply how we can make at least the right choice at the right time for now, and therefore find good pasture, some sense of thriving for ourselves and others, especially the most vulnerable. Then we know that there's going to be an increase of faith and hope and love that God gives us. And anytime there's a increase of that faith and that hope and that love, we know that we're on the right track. We're discerning in the right way, and we're following, in some sense, that voice of Christ in the world. And then therefore we shall come to know more deeply that way in which we can come forward and live a life more abundantly, ourselves, our communities. So friends, let's stop, all of us, children of God. Pay attention to what's going down, what's going round, and allow ourselves to come forward into a path that leads us into the next decision and discernment, keeping Christ close to us and all of our communities in our mind as we keep choosing those things that allow us to follow the voice of God in the world and follow that voice so that an increase of faith and hope and love may be real. Those gifts of God given to us and realized here and now on earth as it is in heaven. Amen.